I'm a Star Wars YouTuber, which means I exclusively deal with very high stakes topics. And a few days ago on Reddit, wait, don't turn off the video yet, there was a topic on the Star Wars Expanded Universe sub posted by a user which basically questioned how positive or useful both Wookieepedia and lore channels like this one are, whether they're able to properly disseminate information, or if they're just functionally replacing people actually engaging with the source material, and whether that's a good or bad thing in either direction. I have a lot of thoughts on this, so we'll start with Wookieepedia, and then we'll get to lore YouTubers. Oh, we'll really get to lore YouTubers.
You really think someone would do that? Just go on the internet and tell lies?
Yes, Buster, they would. And before I get into this, I want to acknowledge we are dealing with something incredibly low stakes here, that being people's understanding of fictional Star Wars lore. But I do want to talk about this a bit because there's a lot that was said in the comments of that thread, which I agree with, and which I'll probably link in the description unless that's considered some kind of brigading, I don't know. But first, to generally address the idea of Wookieepedia or lore videos replacing people actually engaging with Star Wars media, I think there's two main elements here. One is that there's just so much Star Wars media out there. Just within the Legends Expanded Universe, there's over 100 books, hundreds of comics, young reader series, even the old cartoons, dozens of games, and so on. It's essentially impossible to engage with everything yourself. Not only is it a huge time or even financial commitment because you're naturally acquiring everything totally legally, there's some stuff that just does not exist anymore. You cannot find it. But to me as a kid, one of the things that really drew me into Star Wars was the idea that there was this expansive history to learn about and maybe someday try to experience myself. Not like going to the Star Wars galaxy, like just reading the actual books for myself. So reading about a character and then knowing that there were some other stories with that character out there was kind of an exciting prospect. Even if sometimes it just wasn't true. Like I got into reading the New Jedi Order before I read a lot of other stuff. So reading Star by Star, I thought a lot of these characters who were dying off had some extensive backstory in other media. In reality, a lot of those characters were just red shirts introduced in those books to die, but I didn't know any better and it just seemed like a cool idea. So one of the great things something like Wookieepedia or even YouTube lore videos can do is help fill in those gaps for people who may want to read, say, the Thrawn trilogy, and may want to know about what's going on with those characters outside of that particular series, but who may not actually care or have the time to read the rest of the media, which is completely fair. And having access to something like Wookieepedia can give you an idea of what you might want to move on to next. If you did read the New Jedi Order series and that made you a big fan of Belinda Kalenda and you wanted to know what else went on with her, then you'd be able to learn that you can either read the Corellian trilogy or you can just watch a lore video that explains her background. Although I don't actually think anyone has made that particular lore video yet. The other element is that sometimes collecting this information and relaying it the way a Wookieepedia page or a lore video often will can lead to the perception that things were a lot more planned out or connected than they were in practice as the media was released. Kind of like the perception I mentioned that I had after reading the New Jedi Order earlier than other things, especially Star by Star. And I do think this can have some negative impacts on fan discourse, and I did a separate video about that before, but I don't think any of that invalidates Wookieepedia or lore videos as a tool, or most importantly, a source of entertainment. Because after all, this is about people's ability to enjoy a media franchise. There's absolutely nothing wrong with enjoying learning about the Praji family, but having to do it out of a Wookieepedia article, or even just a lore video, because you don't have a copy of the Tinker Tailor Soldier Praji article, something which is basically gone from public existence. Like many Star Wars lore sources, that article is almost impossible to find even if you do want to read it. Not completely impossible, but more effort than any reasonable person should want to put in. There's nothing wrong with picking and choosing which things you want to directly experience while still wanting some outside context on what's going on. So I think I would generally say for Wikipedia the same thing that people would probably hear about Wikipedia in high school or college. It can be really good for getting a cursory understanding of a topic, but it's not in and of itself a source. I've read or personally engaged with a lot more Star Wars books or whatever else than is usually recommended by most practicing psychiatrists, who instead recommend that you click the like button and subscribe for more. But I'll still spend an also unhealthy amount of time on Wookieepedia, especially while I'm reading something, so that I can check if I've seen a character before or a planet or whatever else. One of the most helpful parts of the website is that even if it gets some details wrong, the list of appearances on each page is usually pretty, if not entirely comprehensive, so it can be good for telling you where to start if you want to read about something. There's no reason to go through every single other book or comic yourself in the moment if you're just trying to remember whether J.'s brand showed up outside of Dark Empire. Because he did, and it's not in stuff that's normally accessible anymore. Where I think my experience probably differs from most people's here is that I am then usually trying to communicate that information to other people. So if I'm using Wookieepedia, I'm only using it to get a basic overview, and then I go back and double check the sources it's referencing. Frankly, I don't think most people actually care that much if the Wookieepedia article they're reading is entirely accurate. But if I'm making a lore video, I'm going to do my best to make sure that I am getting the information from the original sources as much as possible. Otherwise, I might just end up propagating a pre-existing mistake instead of making my own original mistakes, which I do all the time as well. So aside from some stuff we'll get to at the end of the video, I'm not exempting this channel from being incorrect about lore. I do make comments in my videos about times where I think Wookieepedia has a mistake in what it's trying to communicate, but I can only really do that because I am checking Wookieepedia when starting a lore video, either to make sure I'm remembering stuff correctly, or to direct me towards elements I may not have known in the first place. But those Wookieepedia mistakes are there. For one example, which I didn't ultimately cover in a recent video, I spoke about the Almas Academy in my video on other Jedi councils. Wookieepedia says it has a 7-member council. In my video, I said 6. This is because the Wookieepedia article mentions the guy visiting to recruit the Amish Jedi into the Clone Wars as being an emissary of the main Jedi Temple in a council position, when he's just a guy talking to them in that specific situation. So that 7th member doesn't actually exist as a member of the council. It'd be like saying Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Qui-Gon were council members in Episode 1 while reporting in. So there's plenty of situations where people will have their own interpretation of what's going on, and that ends up being put as lore on Wookieepedia. And as a probably broader problem in online fandom, any line spoken by a character in any kind of media is taken as verbatim gospel truth. The idea of sometimes people lying or just being wrong about something is treated as a plot hole, so anything that someone says is treated as direct lore, and then if it's just repeated in a factual manner in a Wookieepedia article, people don't really have the context to know where that came from. The most annoying of at least something like this for me is if you go on the Supernatural wiki and you look at the titles and aliases section for each character, it's a list of everything anyone has ever referred to that character as. So instead of just being an insult that Castiel used to distract him, Lucifer has the official alias of Ass Butt. This is all pretty innocuous, and that last example is probably just me being overly pedantic about what an alias is, but fan misinterpretations can easily happen, and then, since a lot of people get all their information from something like Wookieepedia, they have no reason to think it could be wrong. On top of doing this channel, I run an Empire at War mod called Empire at War Expanded, and when working on that, we draw from pretty wide corners of the Star Wars universe. We try to be as consistent with the lore as we can, but we get the effects of this from both sides. On the one hand, we'll often get asked to include things or change things to be in line with certain fan perceptions, influenced by incorrect information on Wookieepedia, or by incorrect information or outright fanon on lore channels, all of which sometimes gets presented or promoted as being quote-unquote real lore. On the other hand, because we are making a game where we can only present things one way, with no stated caveats, we will make assumptions, combinations, changes, or additions to the lore which we think are necessary for gameplay or for design, like fleshing out rosters for a faction with very few known ships, as we've done with the Hapens or Empire of the Hand, or even the Hutts, where we've made designs for ships that have names but no design, and vice versa, where we've made names for designs that don't have one. Some element of this has to extend into every part of the mod that we design, how characters relate to each other, how they're presented, stats on ships. There's some level of interpretation there that's impossible to get around. But then for people who only learn about these kinds of things and lore from the mod, they may take what we're doing as being the one true lore and spread that elsewhere. People have in the past, for example, tried to submit fan-created ships by us to Wookieepedia to create pages there. There were even instances in the past where people assumed that because we were making this as a Star Wars fan modification, we must have had permission to create those ships, and therefore they're official, and this is just very much not the case. But if any warning has to be made about taking what you see on Wookieepedia with a grain of salt before taking it into a very serious Discord argument, that has to go double for YouTubers, and again, this does include me. I've certainly made mistakes or omissions from videos, they happen all the time. I'll try to correct when I can, but one problem with lore YouTube is that you can't really make corrections once you've uploaded a video. Once it's up, and if you make an edit to correct it, you'll have to entirely re-upload, which can basically kill the video. So corrections mostly have to live in comments people almost certainly won't read. You're also dealing with one person's ability to find relevant information, often on a tighter production timeline because they have to finish X number of videos per week, so it's often impossible to look through every source that may come up. This isn't really a criticism in those situations. One of the fun things for me can be having people point out sources that I may not have known of or explored before. There are some video topics that I've covered multiple times where I'll go and unlist the old video, recreate it with hopefully better production value, and taking into account some information I might have missed the first time. And even then, there's editorial choices which come with making a 10-minute video, where there might be enough content for a 30-minute video if you were just going to list off every possible fact about something. That doesn't make the information incorrect, it's just not exhaustive. But this is, again, something which still has very low stakes. I have another channel, one about real-world history, which I would really like to focus on more someday, but one of the things which kind of holds me back there is that I'd feel a much greater responsibility for accuracy than here because of what the implications could be getting something wrong about the real world. But even with those lower stakes and with the intent ultimately being making an entertaining video, I do think lore YouTubers should at least try for some level of baseline accuracy. And to be frank, I don't think that opinion is shared by all lore YouTubers. Or all YouTubers in general, but specifically we are focusing on lore YouTubers. I'm not going to name any names, but there are some lore YouTubers, including some who get fairly big, whose entire video library comes from essentially just paraphrasing Wikipedia articles and never really making an attempt to read about the topics themselves. So any of Wikipedia's mistakes get continued on, along with any mistakes of their own understanding of the topic, which comes almost exclusively from that article. I have several friends who have been super annoyed because they've contributed on Wikipedia and then heard essentially their own words from an article repeated directly back to them in lore videos, almost verbatim, because the person making the lore video is essentially just a text-to-speech copy of that Wookieepedia page. This problem has gotten even worse recently. There's always been an incentive on YouTube to get out higher volumes of content, so copying Wikipedia rather than researching and writing a script yourself was always going to be a faster way to grow a channel. But now there are channels which will just get ChatGPT to specifically write a summary of Wikipedia articles, and then that's their new script, on top of stuff like using AI to generate images of subjects for thumbnails and background images. So you have all the mistakes of Wikipedia, plus all the mistakes that ChatGPT makes while summarizing it, making them essentially useless for communicating any information, because it's incredibly wrong, and often the person making that video doesn't know it's incredibly wrong because they made their script by getting ChatGPT to summarize Wikipedia. They didn't read the original source material, because if they did, they may as well have written their own script, and in some cases it seems like they're not even reading the Wikipedia page anymore to see if the script they're getting is consistent with that, because the important thing is getting more videos out. You can tell when a video has been made this way because if you get an AI summary of the subject's page, it'll sound very familiar and include many of the same factual errors. Mistakes that, again, aren't on the original Wikipedia page. So again, there's nothing wrong with enjoying lore videos, just keep in mind the goal with them is to make money, not to fulfill the goal of accurately disseminating Star Wars lore to the masses or something. So basically, Wikipedia can be a very helpful tool for context and extra information, but don't take it as gospel and double that for lore videos or triple it. They can be fun and sometimes even informative ways to learn about a topic you're interested in a format that's often more engaging than reading a fake encyclopedia article or even the original novel. But always be aware that what you're getting is not necessarily a reflection of reality, and as Abraham Lincoln once said, don't believe everything you see on the internet. That's all for today though, thank you for watching, sorry for the digression from our usual, totally accurate lore videos, we'll be back to those next time. If there's a topic for one of those that you'd like to suggest, or a topic for something more like this that you'd like to suggest, please leave that in the comments as well.